So, Mr. Bookbinder, you talked about different types of conflict of interest that could potentially exist. What are the ones that you're concerned about most?
Well, I would just first of all say that part of the reason why it's hard to find a historical example is because no president has retained a massive global business interest the way that President Trump has previously. So we're really in uncharted territory here. But I would be very interested in the most basic conflicts kinds of questions in terms of how would the president's own tax interests be affected by the changes to the tax law he's made? And then we've also seen that this president has had extensive business dealings with foreign interests. That's something we could learn more about potentially from tax returns. That could be incredibly important.
Well, how would we find that in a tax return if it's his individual tax returns? Would the individual tax returns be sufficient, or would you need to see his business tax returns as well?
I mean, of course, it's hard to know exactly what would be in his tax returns. It may well be that if he's receiving foreign income that he'd be disclosing that. But certainly with the kinds of very complex business interests with literally over 500 different interrelated companies that this president has, it points out the importance of getting those business tax returns, which are going to give a lot more, potentially a lot more information about where the money's coming from and what the
So it doesn't have to be specific to President Trump, but could you give an example of a foreign interest in a business that would be a conflict for a chief executive?
I mean, certainly, really almost, for instance, if there were, if a president had an LLC or some other kind of company which had a partner that was a foreign company, potentially even
so a partner. So an investor could be someone from a foreign country that you could have undue influence.
Exactly, and especially if it's
what would be a type of business that a president could have an interest in that, if money was brought in through that business, would potentially impact the president's decision or vice president?
Well, for instance, a lot of foreign governments have very extensive funds that invest in businesses. And so if there was a sovereign fund that was putting money into, say, a construction project, if there was a Saudi fund or a UAE fund, that could affect the way the president looks at any decision that involves that country, conceivably.